The first opening session will be Peer Perspectives, Why Choice is Important in Supports and Services. And the speakers will be Elyn Saks, a USC law professor and Saks Institute founder and faculty director, Rayshell Chambers, co-founder and COO of Painted Brain, and Tristan Scremin, community liaison with Painted Brain. And now I would like to bring on Elyn.
Well, thanks so much, everybody, for being here. I'm really, just so delighted and so honored to be putting the symposium on and to be speaking with this peer group on why choice is important in supports and services. So first, let me just say that the talks that have gone before, Toby diagnosing the problem, suggesting solutions is really terrific. And Rayshell and Tristan and everybody talking about their story was really good as well. So choice is important in the most fundamental level for two reasons. People know themselves best and care about themselves most. So lodging choice in them makes sense in terms of serving their well-being. Second, giving people autonomy serves their dignity and liberty interests. One feels valued, honored even, to be given choice, even when people may not think that you're making the best choice. As a personal example, I was diagnosed with schizophrenia some 45 years ago. I suffered with delusions and hallucinations and disorganized speech. I went about 10 years resisting my diagnosis and trying to get off my psychiatric medication. I undertook these efforts with great gusto and failed miserably every time. Though I wish I had gotten smarter sooner, I'm glad that I was allowed to come to the decision to take meds in my own time and in my own way. Choice is important to me. One problem with taking away choice is it's not a sustainable solution unless one exerts force basically forever. If we can recruit patients to want treatment, that will be much more sustainable. Indeed, I have a study in mind about what I'd like to do. So in the medication context, there are three groups. First, those who get on meds and are immediate converts. This helps them when they stay on these. At the other side, people who keep trying to get off or refuse to get on. And then the third group is people in the second group tipping to being in the first group. If we study how and why this happens, we may find ways to help people or get people to tip sooner and more often, which often will be in their best interest. It's of course not always possible to give someone choice. If they lack capacity to choose, we must find some alternative than honoring their choice. For instance, if a person were to say, I would love to get back on this medication, it's helped me a lot, but a voice is telling me that it's going to cause a nuclear explosion, I think we should not honor that choice. At that point, there are two possibilities. Find the person incompetent and appoint a guardian to make his decisions. Or, and this is a relatively new product, which we're discussing today, recruiting him to engage in supported decision-making, SDM. Probably the best way to implement SDM is the use of Psychiatric Advanced Directives, or PADs. Most jurisdictions' guardian statutes actually require that guardianship be the least restrictive alternative. We suggest that SDM/PADs are just that, the least restrictive alternative. So instead of appointing a guardian, we ask the person to identify some people in his life who know him and whom he trusts to help him make decisions. Ultimately, it will be the patient's decision, but he will have help if he wants it to make the choice. In one of our projects on SDM, we go to 4 medical centers, USC, UCLA, UCSD, and downstate SUNY New York, to study the use of SDM. We look at whom people pick as their supporters, why, their satisfaction with the decision-making process, and downstream effects on quality of life, like more independent living and working. In another project supported by the Mental Health Services Oversight and Accountability Commission, big shout out to Toby, we're planning an innovation project with some of our colleagues and speakers here today on the use of SDM and PADs in several California county departments of health. We will be seeing how the county departments are implementing SDM and PADs, and again, on the downstream effects on quality of life. PADs are a product that may be one of the best ways to implement SDM. The prior advanced decision supports the current decision. In the PAD, the person identifies in advance what they want to happen should they lose capacity to make choice. So they will identify what forms of treatment they prefer, what sort of medication works best for them, whom in their life to contact for help, who their lawyers are, etc. The counties participating in our SDM and PADS projects include large and small communities, as well as urban and rural. So we're going to look at the spectrum. Our hope is that our projects will show that SDM and PADS are feasible and effective. If so, this will change the landscape of choice and restore more people to being architects of their own lives. Missing. Okay. Again, as a person who has had choice taken away from her and found this very toxic, I'm hopeful that our work will show SDMs and PADS to be good products. I also want to mention that there's an important, essential role for peers to help their fellow persons with mental health challenges to engage in the SDM and PAD process. For example, they can help the person identify what sorts of issues they can plan for in advance and how to decide what plans seem feasible and desirable. As a mental health sufferer and a several-time cancer survivor, I can attest that no one understands the experience of these illnesses better than a fellow sufferer. So peer involvement in SDM and PADS is critical. In short, empowered consumers and engaged consumers should lead to the best results in this space of mental health law. Thank you.
And now Rayshell. Elyn, can you mute yourself, please?
Thank you. I'm so honored to serve on this panel with such distinguished guests to discuss why choice is important. I had to be honest, when I first heard this question, it immediately brought a range of emotions and questions in my mind, mainly because I'm a Black woman with parents. And immediately, all the historical pain around my culture's choice has come up, as well as my own experiences in my life, including being hospitalized and given the wrong treatment options with severe consequences. And then also losing my only supporter to accidental suicide, the importance of having choice and understanding when choice is very important. In many of these instances, I see choice from a cultural lens. As an African American woman, the concept and employment of choice has been for our people a painful acknowledgement that African Americans in America were brought here without choice. And that in some people's lifetime, African Americans weren't able to make their choices. So for me, when I'm asked about my choice, choice means to be fully human, to have agency over my own choices and over myself. Those things were not afforded to me, were not afforded to my ancestors. And from a generational framework, choice is fundamental to my existence as a human, particularly in America. Choice allows voice for agency to employ one's needs and wishes and to fully direct one's path in life. I believe choice is a human right, an inalienable right for individuals to choose their path. Those rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This essential equity means that no one is born with the natural right to rule over others without consent, and that governments are obligated to apply that law equally to everyone. The ability to make choices and treatment, particularly for me as a peer, is important. From this PADS project, I learned through my many conversations with communities, particularly communities of colors, both consumers and family, that many people didn't even know that they had a legal choice to guide in their treatment and crisis situation. And with that, I see that as a social justice issue. If people don't have the full information, then how can they make really informed choices to have full agency over their needs? It's our right to know our choices. And I believe this conversation is a rights conversation. We as people with psychiatric disorders most often don't even know our rights. We're not taught about the Olmstead, PADS, ADA, and full compliance or HIPAA. Choice allows us to plan for our future. And when you have buy-in, people are more likely and People are more likely to participate when they know that they have choice. PADS works to engage, to activate, and empower the consumer. So in closing, and as I reflect on myself as a Black woman with lived experience, I've experienced firsthand in crises where my choice was not considered, and it almost even killed me. Crisis planning has been a major milestone in my recovery. And now that I have a PAD, I have a more informed voice to guide my treatment. PADS allows for the consumer to voice and lead in the conversation, thus supporting therapeutic alliance necessary for quality treatment. So this is a call to action to really, for us as peers, to advocate for PADS, to have choice, to bring choice in our treatment. And I'm so thankful to pass this next conversation to my colleague, Tristan, who is a fighter for me and with us in this rights advocacy movement on PADS. Thank you.
Thank you, Rayshell, and thank you, Elyn, and thank you to this whole symposium. You know, I think I want to emphasize a little bit about the role of peers. I know it's been talked about a little bit here, but it's so fundamental that peers be at the center of this choice and PADS development. I'm a person with schizophrenia. I was first hospitalized when I was 20 years old. I've had 4 hospital stays. I haven't had one in a long time. And part of that is because I did a lot of advanced planning. I have had a PAD for over a decade. I'm writing a new PAD right now to update some things on it. And I think that having this style of one peer helping another is very important. You know, choice too, you know, choice is so important. And I have been in the situation where, you know, I made not very good choices, you know, and luckily I had a family and a support network that helped me. You know, a lot of people need that help. And this idea of supported decision-making is, I think, the best way to help people who need help making choices, you know, and we don't need to take away all their choices, and we need to just support them and help them make the best choices. That's what happened with me, you know, my family, my sister, my parents, my grandmother, friends and family, they all kind of rallied around me, you know, when I was having very serious psychiatric problems. And that sort of helped me come to terms with choice and how to make better choices. You know, I think, you know, the mental health system often is a kind of a gloom and doom place, and no one even wants to join it. I mean, Painted Brain believes in a mental health system that's so interesting and dynamic that anyone would want to join it. And this idea of choice comes back to this. We want to build a system that is dynamic, interesting, fun, creative, you know, so that people do choose to join it, you know. And I think a lot of what Elyn was talking about and Rayshell was talking about too, historically, our choices have been very limited, and we've been sort of relegated into, you know, not being able to choose for ourselves, and this has caused a lot of turmoil. And you know, I myself have been forcibly hospitalized and institutionalized, and I've seen a lot of different parts of the system. And I, similar to what Elyn was talking about, I tipped into that category where, you know, now I do want to take my medicine, I do want to have therapy, but it took a lot of work to get there. And that work had to do with my family and my friends beginning to, after my long period of instability, beginning to acknowledge that I do make good choices now. Maybe I made some bad choices in the past, but now I'm making good choices. So give Tristan more ability to make choice, you know, and this tipping, this shift happened in my life. And I think that was because people, you know, listened to me eventually, you know, and those choices began to change, and I started making good choices. And when I was very unstable, I was always able to reach out to my sister, my parents, my grandmother, my friends. I had that support network that I think, unfortunately, a lot of people don't have that. And if we could build somehow into the system something that would honor people's choices, their decisions, what they want, and also this idea of pre-planning, right? Like a psychiatric emergency happens before the psychiatric emergency, hopefully. So we have these ideas in place, and I think that kind of system is really good, you know. And you know, disabled people, you know, I mean, I identify as a person with a disability, And too often, especially psychiatric disability, sometimes people say, okay, this person just can't make choices. It's a bias. It's some kind of a stigma that's still really strong. I think too many people just really quickly say, okay, all of this person's choices need to be discounted. And I really don't believe that. I think that supported decision making says, okay, let's find a way to honor as many choices as possible, to find a way to create a system that really has that choice for our peers and for ourselves. And thank you again for letting me be on this panel and for your attention today.